Okay, hello. I'm gonna try and do a short video on pruning fruit trees. I'm gonna start with a claim that I'm not an expert. I've just read a book and done a little bit of practice, but plenty to be desired in what I'm learning. So if you have any info to share, please do. Um, this is an Asian pear tree that I planted in front of my house. Oh, probably like 10, 12 years ago now. It was the size of a pencil when I put it in the garden, and now it's March. And this is one of the times a year where I tend to prune it. I tend to prune it maybe twice a year, but March is ideal, especially before things bud out and stuff. Now it depends on your tree. I know peaches and plums you're not supposed to do until after leaf out because they bleed a lot, but apples and pears, this is kind of your ideal time of year before they really wake up. Okay, so for like I was saying, for apples and pears, kind of March is an ideal time to do some of the pruning before things wake up. And now it depends on the fruit tree. This is an Asian pear tree, and it actually has 2 or 3 branches of a European Bartlett pear grafted on it as well. It's hard to see the difference right now. It's easier to see when they flower and fruit. Um, Things you want. Fruit tree, a lot of people say you want it kind of open and not too dense because you get a lot of, I guess if you have too many leaves together, it gets shaded in the inside. You have more chance of, I guess, a fungal growth. I'd say mine's a little crowded here. I'm also very close to some phone lines, so I've always been trying to keep mine at the height below that. You can see the top. The top really needs it because it's got like what's called water sprouts or spouts. I don't remember which one, but you can see all the spots where I've trimmed it, and there's a whole pile like, oh, let's see, there's clusters, like a cluster here and there. Each point there, like you cut it and then 3 or 4 points shoot out of there. So that can be a lot to take off. And I've learned since I did that, ideally you get it when they're really small buds and just clip it with your finger, and that stops them from coming back with vigor. Now, before I really start, there is the 4 Ds I want to try and go through in order. Things you want to, the order you want to do, because you never want to trim more than I think 20% of a tree out at once, and you got to go in this order. I think I got the order right. You want to do damaged, diseased, so damaged branches, diseased branches, dead, um, dangerous, as in like danger to you or people. Like, so for me, I'm against the sidewalk here, so anything shooting out along the bottom would be dangerous. And then desirable. So the last thing is how you want it to look or how you want it to be. I don't have any disease that I'm aware of, but I do have some damage. So if you look back from this perspective, it's against the sidewalk, and the branches have been coming out over the years. And this winter, it got smacked by the sidewalk snowplow a bunch of times. So you can see some damage along these branches here where the cab of the sidewalk snowplow smacked into it. You want to get rid of those, well, obviously because it's just going to keep happening, but also because damaged wood like that is one way for diseases to get in. So today, I'm going to just try and thin out some of the middle, cut off these guys, and then with my pole trimmer, attack the top. Attack a bunch of the water sprouts poking up, trying to get towards the power lines there. Okay, tools for the job. I've got myself some Lysol wipes, a small kind of tree pruning handsaw that can go on top of a pole. I probably don't need it on the pole today. The saw is for the bigger branches. I got some hand pruners. They're supposed to be really sharp. I have to admit mine are not super sharp. Should get that fixed. So this is for the smallest branches. The pole trimmer here, all right, the pole extends longer than this. It's for reaching at the top, and it's got a similar thing to the hand clippers here, except it's a little bigger, so it can do slightly bigger branches. And you just pull on the rope and it closes and opens like that. Ideally, before you start, I'm going to use the Lysol to wipe everything down. You want to have everything clean and sanitized between trees, because if you trim a tree that's got a disease, you don't want to get it on your pruners and then move it onto other pruners. Now I know some people use bleach and I think rubbing alcohol, but I read that Lysol was really good because the bleach, I guess, it can be inclined to kind of wreck the metal on your pruners. So didn't want to do that. So yeah, see how this, I've used this before, it seems to work okay. Yeah, that's it on the pruning stuff. But like I said, don't prune a branch that's too big for these guys, because you want a clean cut. And if the branch is too big, you end up hacking at it and you get a nasty cut, and a clean cut will heal faster. So that's why I have the saw as well. Just wanted to do a close-up of some of the branches along here, because one thing to note, when you trim a tree, you encourage it to grow in different ways. Trees kind of grow up and spread out towards the light, especially when there's no trees next to them. They grow in all directions. In a forest, they tend to be narrow and grow up. But if you look, when you trim a branch, so you can actually see here is a branch where I would have trimmed somewhere around here in the past, and you can see then it starts growing. I've trimmed here a few times. You can see old cuts. You can see the buds near that start sprouting out new branches. So you do encourage new growth when you do it. And actually right here, it's a really good branch to see. You can see I've trimmed it somewhere around here in the past, and then there was a bud that was over here, and it shot out, and it probably got really long, and then another year I came and I trimmed it here, and then the bud closest to the end says, okay, I'm taking over. So it does become a constant game. You really have to think about what you want to do before you start trimming. Over here is another example. Some trimming happened right here, and then we've had a few different buds that have shot out and branched off that since. Okay. Another thing I want to note is, I know apples and pears, having the branches actually slightly angled downwards is supposed to be good for fruiting. You have to know your fruit tree as well, because I know pears, for instance, have things called spurs on them, which I believe the spurs are these tiny little, these aren't going to turn into branches, but they're little mini branches that flowers come on and fruit form on. So pears and some apples tend to have these, and you'll get fruit on these for many, many years. Whereas other trees, I think peaches, don't quote me for sure, but have only fruit on new or second year growth. So you really have to know your tree and how you want to trim it, because the peach tree, I think your overall goal is to make sure there's always young branches and you slowly trim back the old ones. Whereas pear and apple, because they have these spurs, that's less of an issue, at least for quite a few years. So yeah, you've got little spur up there as well. But then the angle of the branches. So if you can see along my trunk here, I've got a branch that's kind of curving down and down. They naturally want to bend up, but they tend to fruit better when they curve down. So when the tree was younger, I actually hung water bottles half full of water off the end to let them bend down, and you leave them on for a few months until the tree kind of holds that form, and it creates, the downward branching or horizontal branching, which is supposed to promote flowering better and fruit formation. Last thing you do want to do when you're trimming, you always want to trim close to a bud. So for instance, if you can see along the branch here, I don't know, that's not great focus. If you can see along the branch here, there's a bud here and a gap and a bud. So if I'm going to trim it, I want to trim right near this bud and not damage the bud. You don't want a big chunk of dead wood, because if I trimmed it here, it would grow off this bud, but I'd have a branch of a big piece of dead wood sticking out, which actually I think you could see in some of my trimmings I showed you in the last section. Another thing to look for, branches that are rubbing together. Rubbing together is one of those gonna cause issues. Finally, I wanted you to look, here's the branch I showed earlier that's gotta go. I was looking at it saying, okay, here's my pruners. Well, that might be a spur, but I think that would be okay. If I want to trim it here, I'm looking saying, that is too big for my little pruners here. It's not going to cut well and make a mess, let disease in. So instead, I'm going to go after that branch with my saw. I'm looking at this branch and it's shooting out towards my driveway. I want to trim it and I'm trying to decide where to trim it. And where you trim it will determine where it grows. Because for instance, if I trim it here, then the branch at the end is going to be this one. It's going to grow straight over the sidewalk. If I trim it here, this will be the new branch that takes over. It's going to shoot that way towards the driveway as well. And I kind of am flip-flopping between those options. This one looks like a spur, so I don't know if it would turn into a branch or not. This one here. I don't want it going towards the sidewalk, so I'm inclined to cut it maybe here, or maybe here, and kind of shoot the new growth to go that way. Okay, so I have finished my trimming of this for March. My goal was to take out the branches that were damaged from the snowplow and then focus on making sure nothing's hanging over the sidewalk or the driveway on the side of the house here. There's still a little bit up there, but my car's small. I'm not going to worry about it now, but eventually you can see, like, probably should go there just to stop it from spreading out. And finally, I was aggressive along the top because it's getting up towards the power lines. And then the other goal, any branches that were crossing or touching on the inside, and trying to keep the inside kind of open and spacious. This isn't super spacious. It's probably more crowded than it should be. I'm not an expert, but it seems to be working good enough for getting a good harvest. I'm leaving it like this for now and focusing more on those branches that are in the way or sprouting up too high. And we found a fun project to do with all the trimmings. Ooh, we made letters and spelled out our names. What do we have here?
Emmeline.
Emmeline. And then over here, Adrian. Kind of a fun little spelling project on the side. Who knew? Tree trimming and spelling went together.